Writing in first-person POV is like writing on easy mode. Rise of the direct-to-consumer model. Readers love to learn through osmosis. This is everything I've studied recently to make me a better writer and an editor. Hi everyone, if you're new to my channel, my name is Yoanna and I am a freelance editor and book coach who has worked on over 400 manuscripts. But I am still always looking to improve both as a writer and as an editor, so every 2 weeks I'm sharing the resources I have found helpful in my research and my studying, so you can skip the fluff and just get to the material that is actually good. Writing and editing are crafts that are always evolving, so I've started a little challenge for myself, and every 2 weeks I'm diving into new resources, be it books and courses, lectures, articles, honestly anything I can find, and I want to share the things I've learned from those resources so you can learn as well. This week I studied a craft talk by author Willie Cash, a publishing article on different publishing trends for 2025, and a book on writing historical fiction by Emma Darwin. Each one gave me a different perspective on storytelling, on the actual business of selling and writing books, and on writing for a specific genre. What I loved about Willie Cash's talk was about how he reframed first-person POV. So many authors assume that writing in first-person POV is like writing on easy mode, or it's just the easiest POV to explore. But what he actually discussed in the video is that it's not one character that you're writing in the voice of, as we all assume, it's actually 3 characters in one. What he means is that first you have the actual narrator who is telling us, the readers, the story. Then you also have the one that is remembering those events, and here the interesting one is that they're actually choosing what they want to include and what they want to omit, which I'm gonna talk about in a second. And then the third one is the one who has experienced those events in the first place. So this is the one that has felt those emotions more immediately. This layering makes first-person POV very rich, but also really tricky to write, which again is something I notice when working with authors, especially newer ones, because they have this misconception that it's going to be such an easy POV to write in, and sometimes they don't really take it as seriously as it needs to be. Something else that stuck with me was also how this exact layering opens up an opportunity for tension or creating tension, which basically what I mean here is that the remembering self, there's this tension between what the remembering self chooses to remember, chooses to recall, and also what they choose to share with us or omit from us. And again, as a reader, you have noticed this, especially with the unreliable narrator, which is something I love to read. But also, as a writer, it's something I love to play with as well. In his video, he also spoke about place and what it does to your characters. And what I mean here is don't use it just as a backdrop, but think about very precisely the effect that the place has on your characters. So he essentially talked about the 3 different things that a place can do to your characters. The first one is that it can limit your character. And here think about, the outsider in a town. This is very the Hallmark movie, but this is essentially how you limit a character to a place. Or it can also define them, and this is especially useful when you're writing secondary characters. And here an example you can think of is any book or movie that you've seen where you have like a very small like a small town, you have the strong sense of community, and you have those characters are defined by the place that they've lived in. And here I am thinking about Gilmore Girls because it's autumn, it's the season of Gilmore Girls, and I can't stop thinking about how well you can actually see how the community or the town they live in defines some of the secondary characters. And the last thing that a place can do is embolden your characters, so it can allow them to grow as people. And that really clicked with me because when I edit manuscripts, I see settings sometimes used just as a wallpaper or backdrop. But actually, if you think about it, this can be one of the most active driving forces in your story. Next, I dug into a publishing industry article that is talking about the publishing trends that are going to be shaping the next year. A lot of it comes down to how technology and economics are going to be shaping, or more like reshaping, this author-reader relationship. And while I don't necessarily agree with every single point that was discussed in this article, there are a few interesting points that I would love to delve deeper into in the upcoming days, because it's something I would love to research. As someone working in the industry, I like to stay on top of things. One big idea that was discussed and I found interesting was this rise of the direct consumer model or relationship. Brandon Sanderson is the maybe obvious, most common, most well known example, and the one they discuss as well, with his Kickstarter campaign that worked as a giant pre-order system, basically. But obviously, it's not just about the big names, and this is something I love that they touched upon on in the article, is that it's more and more indie authors that are actually building their readerships through their websites, through subscription models like Patreon, or some other ones like currently the one that I'm curious to explore as well is Substack. And building upon this, something else I discussed that I found interesting was the shift from the one-off book sale to a more like a recurring subscription model. The idea here is that instead of hoping for one book sale, more and more authors are trying to explore those subscription or membership models where you can have a more sustainable revenue and build community. For me, as an editor, but more importantly, as a book coach, it just reinforces something that I tell the clients that I work with. And that is that publishing, unfortunately, isn't just about writing the book. It's more about thinking long term. And what that means is that you have to think about how are you going to build and sustain this relationship with your readers, how are you going to build your community, how are you going to turn this into a sustainable revenue stream, and how are you going to turn writing into a career. The last resource I studied more in depth this last few days was this book on writing historical fiction by Emma Darwin. And a section that stood out to me specifically was where she talks about language. She talks about how using unfamiliar or periodic specific language can make the familiar feel strange to your readers, but in the best possible way. Essentially, your readers really don't want a historical lecture, they don't want to read their history textbook, but they do want to feel like they're stepping into a different time period or a different world altogether. And something that she mentions here that stood out to me connected to this is how you don't want your narrator or your character to stop to explain something. You don't want them to be the random fuck guy. You don't want them to just pose the narrative and be like, okay, so in those days they called such and such whatever. You want to slip in this fact or this word, you want to slip it naturally into the narrative so it doesn't pose the story, but it still informs your readers. Essentially, it's about subtlety. Readers love to learn through osmosis. So basically, this is where they would pick up a history fact that you spend much time researching. And as someone writing historical fiction, I know that this is a lot of time. You research random facts, but they do want to pick it up through osmosis, and not because you've broken character to just describe something to them or explain something to them. And also, essentially, you don't want them to have to carry a dictionary to understand your book. That is no, well, some readers might like this, but I don't think that would be the majority of them. And as someone writing historical fiction myself and currently working on one such novel, it was a nice reminder. It gave me this permission to trust my readers and give them the history they want, but through more of a natural way, not just over explaining something. So, these were my 3 big lessons from this round of the challenge. First person POV is layered, but it's also complex and shouldn't be undermined, but it gives you the opportunity to play around with your characters and with some tension. Second of all, publishing is moving towards direct connection and recurring models. And historical fiction works best when you let your readers absorb the information naturally and don't pause your story to just tell them something. Well, I'll be doing this challenge every 2 weeks, so if you want to skip the fluff and get practical advice and lessons, just hit subscribe and I will be here to help you. But yeah, thank you so much for your attention and I hope to see you all next week. Have a smiley week. Bye!